Hello, Christine. Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. How are
Good.
you?
I had a longer preamble teed up, but I will dispense with that because Ariel did such a good job. But you've been, at this incredible brand, Marriott International, for over 7 years, spanning four roles, typically in brand focused or insights and strategy. So I think it's a very valuable opportunity for myself and the audience to hear from you and get your perspective. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
So you started, when you got out of undergrad, you started at a PR firm. Sorry, I like to go into people's background, a little Mark Maron piece here, but you started at a PR firm, then you went to Duke for your MBA, and then took a kind of traditional route to be a brand person at J&J, but mostly on consumer-facing sides before Marriott International. How did your previous role and your MBA, for that matter, prepare you for your track record in insights and strategy at Marriott?
So I think I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have different experiences and opportunities. And I think what's kind of been a common theme and thread throughout different experiences has been just that focus on consumer behavior. I started off initially, as you said, like at a PR firm doing communications, focusing on behavior changes. And I used to tell people I can teach people to brush their teeth, but I don't know how to sell the toothpaste. And that's kind of what led me to go back to business school. I really wanted to work on the product side and really understand what is it that motivates people to buy certain brands, to be loyal to them. And then that's what kind of led me to the insights world and eventually at Marriott, where I'm now kind of understanding what it is that drives that behavior and what is that loyalty. And so, again, I've kind of gone through the how, the what, and now the why. And I think that's been something that I've just really enjoyed throughout the past 15 plus years of my career, having all those different experiences.
Gotcha. And I feel like you were ahead of the curve and kind of seeing, that world evolving. So good job on that. And we'll obviously continue with Marriott International, but wanted to ask you, you recently become a founding member of the Women Leading Travel and Hospitality group. Can you tell us more about this group? What is its mission? What are you doing to help realize that goal?
Sure. So this is a wonderful organization. As you said, it's called Women Leading Travel and Hospitality. And we actually just launched this past January, in January of 2021. It was a group that I became involved with a couple months before that, last fall. And essentially, its purpose is to unite women across different hospitality and travel sectors. So thinking about the gamut of different opportunities that there are, especially as it relates to different hotel companies. So obviously, I help represent Marriott International, but there are competitors. So we have people from Intercontinental Hotel Group, from Hilton Worldwide, from all different sectors, as well as just like other areas within the industry. So you think about airlines. There's a woman who works in innovation at DFW. There are people from the online travel agencies. And the idea is that we're really just trying to empower and encourage each other and network and think about some of the things that we can do as an industry and share best practices. But really, it's all about just forming those connections and relationships and trying to connect with other people across the sectors.
Gotcha. Do just off the cuff, do startups feature into that? Are you working with startups to help them bridge the gap between that initial idea and realizing scale and success?
I think there are a few different startups that are members. Yes, I mean, certainly some different partners and vendors and agencies are also involved, as well as just thinking through, again, what are sort of the short term trends that we're seeing? What are the long term implications? Like,
Mhm.
really, a lot of idea sharing. We're actually having a conference, a virtual event next Thursday, May 20th, which should be great too. And it's a pretty low cost to entry. I think it costs on an individual basis about $65 or so for an individual membership. So if people or corporations or organizations are interested in joining, they should definitely check out the website. Again, it's called Women Leading Travel and Hospitality.
I've signed up. I'll
Great.
keep my video off,
Okay.
um,
Sounds good.
or make sure I shave, whatever.
Perfect.
Um, so that was a bit of a selfish question because my wife has a travel-focused startup. But here's another selfish question.
Okay.
My daughter is entering college, wants to study business, which you know I'd happily have her think about her interest more broadly. but that's fine. But when you think about women graduating college this year and are considering careers options in travel, what advice would you have for them?
I would personally say go for it. I mean, there are so many different opportunities you can have within one company or one organization, depending on the functions, the different areas that you're interested in. And don't be afraid to kind of just dive right in. I mean, I had a manager for a long time who he started off after college as like a banquet server and then rose up to be 2 levels from the CEO and was the chief sales and marketing officer. So there are a plethora of opportunities that you can take advantage of if you're interested in working in the front office, the back of the house. You could be out helping guests at the pool or the beach, depending on the location. But there are just so many different things that you can do in terms of various skill sets. And you just learn and network so much. It's just a wonderful industry. And I think it's led me to a lot of different locations around the world, both for professional travel, but also personal trips and everything. And so I love it. I would say jump right in, go for it.
Yeah, and my daughter loves to travel, that's for sure. Now, this may be an insane question, but what signs of leadership do you look for entry-level employees when you're hiring?
I think that somebody who's a good leader would jump in with a lot of enthusiasm, would be ready to kind of hit the ground running, who would observe and learn and kind of lead from example too, but also just would want to take charge and would want to kind of go right away. So being that kind of extroverted personality, very charismatic, but also just taking some time to step back and to look at the way others are handling situations. I think that's really demonstrative of somebody who's very intentional and very focused, but also really wants to make a difference and to demonstrate those qualities and capabilities as well.
Awesome. I'll play this back for her, because she's not going to listen to me.
Okay. Or feel free to have her reach out to me. I love helping her, trying to guide.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. In my research for this discussion, I've concluded that you're an optimistic and curious person, as one might be when they get to your level. How have those traits helped you manage through the global pandemic, whether it be personally or professionally?
So I think you definitely have to stay optimistic, especially I think if there's anything the past 15 plus months have taught us is that there will be ups and downs and highs and lows. So I think just in terms of trying to stay positive and optimistic, for me, it's finding gratitude in a lot of the small things that I probably previously took for granted. I have started doing a little bit of those gratitude journals where at the end of the day, I write 3 things down that happened that I probably might not have necessarily recognized or acknowledged in the past. And they could be little things, they could be big things, but I love to go back and read them and see some of the things that I've noted, because again, sometimes it's very minute things, but then other times it's big deals. And so it's nice to just be able to recognize those moments. And I think that helps me stay positive and just doing things for other people. I really want to try to help and serve however I can. And so whether it's being a support for my family, for my friends, for my coworkers, just trying to be that person who can offer a helping hand or listening voice or whatever it is. I think that's what helps me stay positive and grounded too.
Gotcha. And that kind of aligns with my worldview that positivity is a choice, that you can decide to make or not. And I think positivity is the better choice.
Exactly.
To make the most obvious comment, hopefully I'll make today. You recently said in an interview, it's okay to fail. Have you had any failures in your career that ended up helping you achieve more in the long run?
So again, maybe this is just the optimist in me, but I wouldn't necessarily classify or consider things as failures, but maybe just redirections. I love the quote that rejection is protection, right? That for some reason you might shift, you might do something a little bit differently because of circumstances. And so I think for me, if it's maybe again, not something that would have been anticipated or expected, and I could maybe pivot or look at it as an opportunity to redirect, that's how I try to consider it. So that's where I've been.
Gotcha. Associated with that, if you could go back in time and tell yourself one thing, what would it be?
I would tell myself just be ready, be excited, and try to connect and form good relationships with different types of people. I think as women, particularly, we're told a lot of times to have those like board of directors or board of advisors who will be mentors and resources for us. And I think it's so important to have different types of board of directors or board of advisors. So I love the people who are the cheerleaders, the ones who will always look out for you and who will encourage you and support you no matter what. But I think you also need like the ones who are kind of like the coaches. Like I think of the image of somebody who's like entering a wrestling ring and there's a coach behind them like massaging the shoulders and saying this is what you should do or this is the move you should make next. And I think you need people who will push you, those who will say you are ready for this opportunity, or I trust in you and I think that you are ready to take on this new challenge and I want to support you, but I think you need to have that confidence in yourself too. So I would just tell myself, like, surround yourself with great networks and good mentors and advisors who will help and encourage you along the way too.
Yeah, I wish you had told me that.
I have to tell it to myself a lot of times too, so we can tell each other.
I certainly have not segmented people in my life to that degree. That's interesting. We'll get more into segmentation later. But let's dig into your role at Marriott International. So you're Senior Director, Global Enterprise Insight and Strategy. That screams smart person to me. But what is under your purview with that kind of title?
So I think I'm incredibly fortunate because I have probably one of the best jobs, not only at Marriott International, but also within, I think, the world. I mean, essentially, I look at different trends, think about what are some of the expectations of our guests. I think about what it is that we're seeing play out real time in the market and take all of that and collectively come up with recommendations, think about opportunities for our business, think about ways that we can really lean into it. And so from a strategy standpoint, we have a leadership team where they're just kind of constantly coming to us and it's a little bit of that top-down approach. And then we're also more bottoms up where we're helping them think through and say, these are the white spaces, these are the opportunities, like we need to tap into this, we need to leverage this. And it's really just fascinating because again, things are changing and evolving constantly. There are all sorts of conditions and experiences that we would have not anticipated a few months ago and that are so different even from a year ago or 7 years ago. So I think it's really cool that in the real-time moment, I'm able to think about, again, what are some of those opportunities or where do we go from here?
Gotcha. You're the second person I've talked to today in the travel industry who absolutely loves her job. And it's really gratifying to see that. Let's dig into a little bit into data and insights. You know, what advice would you have for travel marketers to get the most out of the data that they have at their disposal for their marketing purposes?
So when I think of data, I mean, the common conception is that it's just metrics, it's measures, it's performance figures, right, and it's really quantitative. And I agree on one level that that's absolutely accurate and true. But I think we have to think about like qualitative metrics and where we can lean into like ethnographic research, where we can look into data that's like in the moment. So, you know, obviously, like we haven't been able to go into people's homes lately or anything like that, but we see people at our hotels. We see people, we can do those observations or intercepts or interviews where we can just talk to guests in the moment, or we can pay attention to what they're saying on social media, not only about us, but about our competitors as well. So my advice would be lean into some of the channels and the outlets that are available and make sure that you're thinking through it very holistically. Like, what is that end-to-end experience? And again, what's important to us might be different for other competitors, for other interest groups, but can we take something away from it that would identify some of those opportunities or white spaces too?
Gotcha, that's interesting. So yeah, it seems we've gone to this, the pendulum is swung to completely quantitative and metric driven, and we forget about the qualitative sometimes.
Exactly.
So sometimes the focus group of one should have validity, I guess.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Now, you know, what's the best way for marketers to use their data to understand the impact of their efforts? Is it, you know, I come from a lot of direct response background, and it's always, well, that's going to be bookings. But what other ways can people leverage their data?
I think that if they're seeing additional social chatter, if there's kind of that unaided awareness. So, I mean, think about like your Thanksgiving table. You could go around and talk to people about like what hotel brands come to mind. And if they were to say any of the ones that the 30 brands that are under Marriott International, that would make me really happy because they would have that as kind of the top of mind brand and reference point. So just thinking through, again, if it's considered, if it's being used, if it's something that like people are talking about spontaneously. I think those are the things where we kind of demonstrate success and that we can say, okay, that ties back to like people know us, they value us, they trust us, and they want to hopefully have great experiences with us too.
Gotcha. Yep. And obviously, or it's very trite to say that first party data is incredibly important. And it is, but how are you engaging in the best way with your Marriott Bonvoy members as we are hopefully coming out of this pandemic?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate because we do have a lot of access to the different sources of data. So we have a platform where anytime our guests are filling out the surveys after their stays, they're rating, they're ranking, they're adding in verbatims where we can analyze for different sentiments. We can track just how properties are performing. We are also looking at our communities. We have a lot of channels where we have the chance for members to tell us feedback on different ideas that we're concepting or testing. We're trying to stay proactive with our communication too, just align expectations. I mean, a lot of things have changed over the past year or so. And so the stakes are really high for that sort of post-pandemic or first trip during this time. And we want to make sure our guests kind of know what to expect because there will be some nuances and differences that they haven't seen before. And so I think just staying really transparent and honest, but also responding real time, like when people don't have a positive experience and they share that on social media, being there to acknowledge it and to hopefully make up for it, or just say like we want to recognize like we would do everything in our power to prevent the situation, or thank you for this feedback, or we love hearing the great stories too where they are really giving kudos to some of our frontline associates who are working extremely hard during this time and just thinking through all of that. So I think as much as we can be really authentic in those conversations and listening to our members, it's so incredibly important.
And it's so incredible when you have that positive experience, you're in a rush, you're flying from meeting to meeting, not literally flying, but as a New Yorker, I feel like if I'm not in a rush, then I must be on vacation.
Exactly.
So yeah, when someone helps you out and someone really hooks you up, it's amazing. So at Neustar, we think we're really strong in understanding pathways to conversion and through like our MTA products. We also have products for helping people understand non-converting pathways. How much is that negative helping out the positive, or how do you think about enhancing the conversion path?
So I think we have to look at some of those gaps, like what's creating the barrier that people might not book, or that they might not choose to go to one of our hotels and they select as competitors instead. And just really get into that a little bit further. Like, was it something like either in the experience as they were researching? Was it something that another ad caught their attention and it was a lower price? Like trying to dig into that. And I think as much as we can, we want to try to get into the psyche and mindset of our guests of what's most important to them. And it's going to vary by different trip occasion. Like somebody who would be traveling for business will have a very different perspective than somebody who's going on a 2-week-long vacation, versus even the type of vacation somebody might have if they're just going for like a short weekend, or versus like, kind of that bucket list vacation or trip. So just really understanding like what prevented them and could we have done it better? Are there things that, again, along that customer journey or experience that we could improve or optimize so that hopefully we do get that conversion in the future too?
Gotcha. And, it seems like pre-pandemic, the world was a lot more simple when it came to things like consumer segmentation. And you've written a lot about this, but it seems like it's a lot more complicated now. Not sure if it will be forever, but there's, I think you've talked about revenge travel. I'm thinking about, segments called grandmas who've done well in the stock market who want to visit grandchildren as a segment. How has that changed in your world?
Yeah, so definitely. I've heard that the term silver sneakers a few times being used for that segment as well. But I think that it really just
That's a
depends.
better name.
Yeah. It really just depends in terms of, again, what people's motivation or purpose is. So I think what we've seen is that there's a lot of blurring and intersections that are happening. Like it's not just exclusively like sort of one category or one segment. And that sometimes there could be like longer weekend stays where people are going to a personal trip, but they're extending it and they're working remotely. At Marriott, we launched this Work Anywhere program back in the fall where we're encouraging our guests. This was really based off of like a lot of the things that we were seeing play out real time, where guests can go, they can either book what we have as like a day pass, a stay pass, or a play pass, where they just go for the day, they go for the overnight, and they can be working maybe from their hotel room or a converted business center or whatever it is, but then they're also combining it with some family time or just relaxation and downtime too. So that's a whole segment in terms of just the idea that people are blurring their trip purposes and that it's no longer just one type of trip, that there's that combination. Going back to your point about like the revenge travel, I mean, I think it's really interesting. And I caught a little bit of the session with Rachel and Joe right before where they were talking and alluding to that. And I think that what's really interesting about revenge travel is that people will probably spend a little bit more again on that first post-pandemic trip because we do see the accumulation of miles and travel credits and just that they haven't necessarily spent as much on travel related expenses over the past year. So they are excited to not only get back out there and travel, but also hopefully take advantage of some new opportunities, new experiences that they haven't done before. And they're willing to spend a little bit more in the process too.
Yeah, and I think this is more or less informed by your writing, so excuse me, but I think that could have more lasting effects as people now realize that travel is not something to be taken for granted anymore.
Exactly. I think that there's a lot more gratitude in general when it comes to travel. Like I've seen the headlines where business travelers have said, I miss the flight delays. I miss not just like the perks and privileges of going to like an airport lounge or maybe staying at like one of our hotels and going to the executive lounges or something, but I really just miss the idea that I can be productive on the road, that I'm interacting and experiencing new people, places, things along the way. And I won't take it for granted. I'm going to be more appreciative going forward. And even I've seen it's funny because people like as they're going back on planes, like I think people are being a little bit nicer to each other too, a little bit more accommodating and just in general trying to be appreciative that this is something that was such a part of their lives for so long. And then when it was kind of taken away, they didn't realize how much they missed it until it was gone too.
Oh, I love that trend. And I hope we're all nicer to each other in every facet of life. And I realize I'm from New York, but I believe that. Now, obviously there's been a huge impact on the travelers and the travel experience, but there's been also a massive impact on franchises or franchisees, people who own Marriotts, and I guess that's probably something like 2/3 of your, I don't know, what did I say before, 1.4 million properties. How are you guys helping, franchises with the economic impact of the pandemic?
So we've had a lot of listening sessions and different dialogues with our owners, with our franchisees, with our partners about what's most important to them in terms of their concerns. Since Marriott International started, the very first mantra of the company has always been, you take care of your associates first, they'll take care of the guests, and the guests will come back. And our owners and franchisees are obviously such huge partners in that. And so listening to what's important to them. I mean, many of them are small business owners and they've said
Right.
like, we need to be thinking about not just like some of our, capital expenditures and whatnot, but how are we going to pay our teams, our labor, our staff? Like we need to make sure that we're thinking through their concerns. So lots of listening sessions. I'm on a couple of special task forces and projects where I'm really trying to represent the consumer point of view as we're thinking through, okay, what are some of the areas where it might not make it as much of a difference to the guests. Like, could we take away, I think about like some of the in-room paper collateral. So I've always had little table tents or signs talking about, the elements that are in the room, just like water bottles. explaining like those kinds of things. Could we replace it with QR codes? Could we have something that would just be a little bit less, cost stringent and everything there too? So just understanding some of those like priorities and preferences, and really just keeping our pulse close to what they're saying and how we can help them in that way. It's been really important to us.
Yeah, and it's terrible that at 50 years old, I finally realized how critical hotel workers are. I mean, I always realized it when it was, we talked a little bit before, when you have a great experience, you remember it. But I had not put myself in those people's shoes before, and I have now, and I feel better about that. But yeah. And then, riffing on the question of before, is there something you would tell yourself now that about the travel and hospitality industries that 7 years ago you didn't know, and it would have been good to know when you started your Marriott international career?
I think this probably goes back to something we were talking about with your daughter and the question related to what I would look for in terms of college graduates. It's just get as much experience as you can across different teams, and don't be afraid to try different opportunities. So say yes to challenges, or when you're tapped on the shoulder to participate in projects or groups, look at it as an opportunity. I mean, a couple of years ago, I had an incredible fortune to go when we were having some different challenges from the labor standpoint. I had the chance to go behind the scenes and work on property for almost 2 weeks. And it was just such a learning experience to see it through the eyes of kind of the back of the house, and to interact with guests, and to just be able to have that perspective and lens. It was something that I'll always remember because I had that opportunity and I said yes. So I would just go and say there will be highs and lows, and again, those peaks and valleys, but take advantage of those opportunities and say yes, and don't be afraid to raise your hand too.
The reverse, would yourself 7 years ago be surprised at where you've gotten, or was this kind of the goal?
I think I'd be pretty surprised on some things. I mean, I've been so fortunate, like you said, I've had a couple different roles, and I think a common thread throughout them has been that consumer behavior side or the insight side. But I've gone from more of a regional role to a global role. I've done brand management, I've done insights, I've done strategy. So I think the experience of, again, working in different teams and networking, I mean, hospitality, I think in general, is such a connection-based business, and it's so important not only to form those relationships with the guests and with the teams, but also with your superiors, with the other people who you're working with. And I just think that, I would be a little bit surprised, but again, I just look back, and maybe this is again the gratitude speaking to, but I feel very fortunate that it's been leading me to the path where I'm on right now too.
Well, kudos. That's great. Getting back into kind of the future of travel, and here's the obvious but I think important question. When we see the rebound of the travel industry, we have some people indicating it's not going to happen for a while, some saying it's going to happen very quickly. I think right now we're still far from normal, but what does returning normal mean to you, and will we ever be truly back to normal, or have we gone through a seismic shift where that has changed everything?
So I think there are a couple layers to that. I mean, I think that we probably won't ever go back to the way it was, but we're moving towards that next normal. So what it's going to be in the future. And I think some things have definitely shifted towards the better, and that we've really leaned into preferences and nuances and considerations that are super top of mind and that will always be relevant. I think some things, there are just things that we will want to have continue that we've focused in on. So I think about sanitation and cleanliness. Like there was I think an announcement from the CDC a few weeks ago that a lot of the different protocols that were in place were more of that like hygiene theater. And I don't know that that's not still important. I think that that's something that's really now expected and assumed. And again, going back to this idea that like some people haven't gone out there and traveled for a long time, like they expect to see that. And we want to make sure that we're having those different cues, those visual indicators where we're showing like we do take this seriously. And of course we have like very stringent protocols and standards and everything, but having the visible touch points where people are saying like, okay, we can see demonstrable cues of people doing cleanliness procedures and whatnot. I think that's really important. So going back to the question, like, I think this is kind of the evolved normal or that next normal, and people, it's going to still be really important. And we just kind of have to take it a day at a time and make sure that we're listening, we're paying attention, and that we're adapting and adjusting as we can if we need to.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I must admit that I've never used Purell with any kind of in any habitual way before. I was always a you got to eat a lot of dirt to die person, but I've changed my tune, even though we know that it's not really on surfaces, etc.
Exactly.
Apart from the cleanliness aspect, are there other aspects of the travel experience that will have changed for the good going forward?
I think people, going back to this idea that people will appreciate it a little bit more, that they'll also focus and lean into this idea of purposeful travel. So people are going to destinations feeling like, I want to leave feeling better than when I arrived. I want to feel some sort of intentionality or purpose when I'm traveling, not just that I'm going to check the box or do what I need to do, but that you feel good about it. And so I think a lot of it has to do with that newfound appreciation. I think also people will be more focused on nature. I loved what Rachel was talking about in terms of the experiences of being outdoors and incorporating different natural elements. Like we've seen people talk about, like, they have these open air skies and celestial experiences where they're seeing stars for the first time in these previously polluted environments and stuff. And I think it's so much of a kind of returning to that like organic roots, and people want to experience it. So I think that's something that we'll see is changing and evolving, definitely, that probably hopefully will continue even as people take different types of trips, that they'll just have that newfound appreciation too.
Gotcha. That's interesting. And your CEO Tony Capuano recently said the distinction between business and leisure travel is fading, and you've talked already today about mixing purposes for a trip. Does this all mean that I'll be able to see stars when I stay at a Marriott when I go to the meeting in Chicago? Or really the question is, what does this mean for Marriott and for the industry, as you guys think about marketing, as you guys think about insights, etc.?
Yeah, so Tony recently talked about that idea that, like, as we said, like the different trip purposes are merging. So people are taking more of the leisure trips, the extended vacations, that kind of thing. And what I think that really means is that, again, there's a blurring that's occurring. It's no longer like one type of trip, it's two combined, or there are multiple layers within it. And I think what's interesting is that in terms of the experiences for people going forward, it's going to be different types of business trips. Like I consider, for example, when you think about how several teams are starting to work more remotely, or organizations or companies are thinking about the flexibility of having people work from home, there's still going to be a need for people to connect in person. They miss that social interaction. They want to be together with their friends, their coworkers, etc. And so we are anticipating that some people who previously never really traveled for work, they're going to start to be the travelers that will travel a little bit more frequently. Maybe there will be a quarterly get together, or they'll have some all hands meeting where everybody needs to be in the same place. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see like how people shift their business travel in addition to maximizing it. Like if they previously went in for one or two sales meetings or closings, maybe they'll go to a certain location for like 4 or 5 meetings and just maximize that ROI as they're thinking through, because otherwise they could potentially do it virtually, but there is something so important and tangible about that face-to-face in-person connection too.
Yes, it'd be good to leverage being out of the house for longer periods, and I'm sure everyone in my family agrees that it would be good to have me out of the house for longer periods. But when it comes to guest preferences, there's going to be a host of new variables. Do you see any trends there, or any big changes?
I think some of the biggest changes have been around connecting their devices, like being able to have that consistent, reliable Wi-Fi, knowing that they can work from anywhere. I think also just we were doing a lot in terms of the contactless and touchless technology before the pandemic started. So the remote keys, the keyless entries where they can skip the desk, where you can have it downloaded to their app at the time. There's a lot of that I think is leading into opportunities where people already were headed, but it's just been accelerated. I think that we've seen such a digital transformation over these past, again, 15 plus months that has really accelerated a lot of those needs and behaviors as well.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I no longer want to have to figure out where ESPN is on the local TV system, and just using my iPad would be just, chef's kiss. What was the first time during the pandemic that you started to see promising data that suggested travel might be turning the corner? What data really, in your mind, was that tipping point? Or is it still to come?
I think there have been some we talk a lot about like the green shoots, like those promising indicators where we've seen at either by market, like certain destinations that are popping to the top in terms of search or bookings. Definitely like over peak periods where people typically travel. So vacation periods, holidays, long weekends, we are seeing a lot of those good signs where there's strong intention, either people are booking or they are searching. And so I think, some of the signs of optimism, it happened pretty early on. People miss travel right away. I think that was one of the things that was so interesting is, again, going back to this idea that you don't even realize how much you miss it until it's gone. But I think that as we were seeing people explore virtual vacations or for broad inspiration, like thinking about that next big trip, that when we saw that we had different destinations that were really rising to the top where people were going for longer stays, they were making kind of last minute decisions to go somewhere for a long weekend or something. Those were those green shoots. Those were the signs of optimism and recovery. And certainly this summer, it's really, we're right now in this great timing of the perfect storm where we're so fortunate as a country that a lot of people are starting to get more fully vaccinated. The weather is getting better. Schools are wrapping up for the year. People have the pent up vacation. They have the extra miles or whatever it is. So in terms of all of these factors and variables coming together, we really are anticipating that there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm and excitement this summer. And our hotels are ready. We're ready to welcome you, and we can't wait to do so when the timing is right, whatever that means for people.
Gosh, I'm kind of low on miles. Maybe we can have another meeting about that. But 2020 was not just about COVID-19, right? There was a number of societal changes that we've gone through, and a lot of that's been reflected in the way that corporations are behaving and the way they look at social issues in the U.S. Do consumers and employees drive this broadly, or where is that coming from? Do you think it's a fad? How is Marriott dealing with that?
Yeah, you think about the past year plus, like there were so many, as you said, like different causes and movements that our guests, the people in the general population, everybody was kind of aligning themselves to. And these are important movements and causes that brands need to have a voice in that conversation. It can't just be an acknowledgement, but it needs to be participating actively in that dialogue. So I don't consider it a fad. I think it's something that we've seen that our guests are really going to align themselves and be loyal to brands where they have those meaningful connections and relationships, and that they're participating in the conversation in a very authentic way, that it's very sincere. It's not just because they should, but it's because they want to. And it might be good for business, but it also is the right thing in general to do as individuals and as companies and groups too.
Right, and that's very pleasing to hear, honestly, that perspective.
Thank you.
From my side. Ariel, is it time for us to move on?
You are actually the last speakers of the day, so I'll give you a few more minutes to close it out.
Awesome. Well, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, Christine, is I think you've, in your role, you've had a chance to go spend time in international markets, which is, I think, everyone's career aspiration at some point or another. It's certainly my daughter's. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What did you learn? What was surprising, et cetera?
Sure, happy to. So yes, as you said, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to go abroad a few different times for professional purposes. I had a couple stints where I've done task forces in different countries. And most recently, that includes going before the pandemic. So back in 2019, I went to Asia for about 4.5 months. So I was based out of our Marriott office in Hong Kong, and then traveled all around the region, got to go to, candidly, I lost count, I think about 25 or 30 different hotels. So I went to China, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Singapore. I went back later in the year to do about 8 of our hotels in India as well. And it was just such an incredible opportunity to learn and connect with the guests, with the associates, with the teams. And when I was there, I would just mostly do trainings and sessions where I would talk to them about our brand positioning. We would do workshops together where we would strategize and say, okay, if this is something that we're seeing as a challenge, or this is something that we're doing really well that we want to share with others. So thinking through how we could replicate that or turn it into a best practice. And I loved it. I mean, it was just one of the most incredible experiences I could have ever asked for professionally, because not only did it feel really tangible and impactful that I was able to be there and to see like kind of real time how it played out, but also just, again, the chance to connect with incredible associates from around the world. And we are so fortunate. We have 700,000 associates, 7,600 hotels, 30 brands. And I mean, just to be a small micro segment of that was just a wonderfully humbling and amazing experience too.
Well, Art, thank you. That's illustrative or illuminative. And relatedly, one more question, and this time has really flown by. You know, if I could visit any Marriott International hotel tomorrow, what would your recommendation be?
So do you have a preference for a country, or is it domestically that you're considering? I mean, again, so many.
Let's go internationally, because, you know, as long as we're aspiring, let's go big.
Okay. So, of course, I'm going to promote a couple of the JW Marriotts because I was on the global brand team for 2.5 years, but we have incredible properties. I would say in Phu Quoc, Vietnam, it was rated as one of Travel and Leisure's top resorts in Asia for several years in a row. There's a great property in the Maldives too, or the Shanghai if you're looking for city center. I think also abroad, we have just amazing Ritz-Carltons, Ritz-Carlton Reserves. A lot of people don't even know that Ritz-Carlton is part of the Marriott International umbrella, but we have wonderful brands for W, Westin, I mean, Renaissance, the Marriott signature brand. There are properties I think about in Barcelona, in London, in Palma de Mallorca, Spain. I mean, it's just the whole gamut. Like that's why I think people are so excited and eager to travel, and that revenge travel is real, that people have been planning those bucket list trips for a long time now. And hopefully, again, won't take it for granted, but we'll really lean into it and want to go places around the world and come to our hotels.
Well, on that note, everyone should log into their Bonvoy account and see how many points you need, and get on the road. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ken. Great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. That was such a fascinating conversation, and I cannot wait to see you both back on the stage soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.
So with that, we will close the day. Thank you everyone for joining. It was a fantastic day of speakers. We hope that you will join us tomorrow, May 14th at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Brand Innovators Sports Upfronts. We will be joined by marketing leaders from AB InBev, Danone, the National Women's Soccer League, Nationwide, Ally, Pen Pal, Wells Fargo, PepsiCo, Verizon, EA, and many, many more. So thank you again for joining, everyone, and hope to see you tomorrow. Bye.